Welcome, Pascal.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi.
Hi. Really happy to have you on the show. So, Pascal, you are co-founder and head of product at Monito.
Correct.
You will have the time to explain us a bit what is Monito and what you are doing exactly. And then we will jump to a very interesting subject because you start this, so your company is a startup, and basically you had to learn for yourself what is UX design, what is I don't know if you did product management before, but I think a lot of things you had to learn a lot of things while you were doing them. So yeah, I let you introduce yourself and what you are doing.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin, for having me on the show. Happy to be there. And so let's start with Monito. That's a startup I co-founded with a friend and my brother. It's been now 8 years ago. And we're basically building a comparison website for international money transfer services and catering to the needs of people who migrate between countries and need to navigate the jungle that can be, and then send money back home to their friends and families with the best providers, and while spending less on fees and bad exchange rates. And you're right that nothing really in my background before I started Monito prepared me for the various jobs I've did afterwards at Monito. For the three founders, it was the first company we worked at. It was right out of school, basically, and I had studied geography first, development studies and international relations as a master after that. And so when I was brought onto this adventure, I basically tried to first figure out which of my skills could be applied to the company. And I quickly realized that I had to switch the mindset and find what were the skills that were most needed for the company to succeed. And my brother Francois was taking over user acquisition with his marketing background. Laurent, the third co-founder, was taking over all the business development side of things, and so I was left with the most exciting part. I would say the product, and I had done some websites as a student job to kind of get a bit of extra cash, and so I knew the basic of web development, which means how to put together a WordPress theme, basically, and so that's how I started. I did a WordPress themes for Monito, and then took over all of so we quickly hired someone, a software engineer, to take over the coding part of things. But then I focused on the design, research, and product management of the company. And for 5 years, I was the only designer in the team.
Wow. And so just to precise, to add these details that I'm not sure if we mentioned it, but you are sure. a Swiss-based company. You are near Lausanne, right? And you are within, I think.
So our office is at the center of Lausanne. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. And when did you start the company?
So it's the inception was at a startup weekend. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept, but it's basically one weekend where a lot of people gather together and form teams and basically work on one idea in a group of 5 people. They work on one idea and then pitch it at the end of the weekend as a startup competition, basically. And so Francois and Laurent had participated to several startup weekends, and apparently I was the closest thing they could find to a designer the week before the startup weekend, and so they brought me on. And so during that time, so when we over a beer before the startup weekend, when we discussed what idea we could try and pitch, we came with this issue that we were facing with François and my brother, with this small NGO that we had founded as kids already to support some various projects in a village in Cameroon. And so we were sending money to Cameroon, small amounts of money that were received in cash. And we were doing that a few times a year for 15 years. And so we were facing those high fees, bad exchange rates, and we really realized that there were many people in the same situation as us, mostly migrants, sending money back home to support their families. And so that's we pitch a problem more than a solution at the start of the weekend. And on Saturday, the idea was to build a better way to send money abroad, right? That's the most straightforward issue to bypassing the Western Union of the world. But over the weekend, we basically realized that there were so many options that we didn't know about, that were already kind of popping up everywhere, mostly in the UK, to send money at a much better rates, much more efficiently. And so we realized then that what was maybe lacking was information and a way to transparently compare all those providers. When most of the fees is hidden in the exchange rate, that's not easy to compare which of two providers might be the best. And so that's where the idea of the comparison website was born. And so this was 8 years ago. And then we were still studying at the time, and so we worked on it as a side project for a bit more than a year and a half before we decided to work, the three of us, full time on the project. And then the company was founded 2 years later officially, a few months before we raised our first seed round, basically.
Wow. So we this is funny because we met in a really specific setup, right? I met you the first time. It was for a job interview.
Correct.
we discussed about design research and how to do UX design, basically for your products. And I remember back in the time that you were really strong on the idea of testing your ideas first, starting from the idea, and then move to the test, and then retrieve data directly from the customer, right? And I don't know if you remember it, but we had a pretty long conversation about it. And now we had a discussion like some days ago, and you told me that you changed a bit your mind, or maybe your point of view on the topic changed a bit. Now you have a lot more designers in the company, right? And you linked me back to one of the early article you wrote about doing design. You alone as the product manager and the UX designer, and you had a lot of points that I think are still a lot common in the conversation regarding design and designing products. Is to be pragmatic, right? To be pragmatic about design. You are a startup. You don't have so much money and time to spend on research. So, and you have a big influence of this lean startup approach, right? It's you have to build something, then you have to put it on the market, and then you can retrieve data, and this is where you can learn and adapt your product. And so this was it. Tell me if I'm wrong, but this was a bit kind of a summary of where you stand regarding doing UX design, starting from the idea, then having a way to find a way to implement it. The sooner is better, and then retrieve data.
Exactly, yeah. And I remember our discussion. It was when we so you interviewed for the position, the first designer position we opened. That was a bit more than 2 years ago, and I remember that this was the longest interview I had made, and this should have been a sign that you were going to launch your podcast, because there was already this ability to discuss design related topics for hours. And yeah, you did a good summary of how I used to approach design and how I mostly still do. I think the keyword pragmatic is definitely one that is still always top of mind for me. There's all of the things we do need to make sense for and be adapted to the context we are in, right? We don't do things by the book because the book told us so. We only do things when we believe it makes sense for us right now. And I think one of the take I had at the time, and on which I maybe change a bit, is that I wasn't doing a lot of user research before launching an idea or product. User research for me was most efficient when I had an existing feature or product that I wanted to test, and most of my user research was based on data and analytics, and so in that regard, I may have had a profile that is a bit uncommon for design, in which I'm more of a quantitative guy than a qualitative one. And so I was eager to ship things so that our users could start using it, and I could see how they use it, and what works and what doesn't, and then do a lot of user testing on it to see how well the product works, and then based on that, keep what stick, and then iterate on what doesn't. And so, I believe in a more traditional design thinking, where you would kind of spend more time doing user research to generate ID, and then do a lot of testing on those ID before you actually ship them to production. And we kind of sometimes bypass that step to start with, okay, we have this ID, let's see if we can find a very cost-efficient way to build it, and then do user research with the starting point of the data that we have on the on the platform. And I still believe that's the right approach in many cases, but it's not the same when you have a product that is used by 500,000 users every month, and that some people rely on, that generate revenues that the company also rely on, where it's not just a pre-seed phase where revenue is just a signal, but not really something that is part of your financial as a startup. And so now we do A/B test also, because we don't want to risk losing conversions and losing kind of the efficiency of the product. So we would, even if it's not something that we think will improve the user experience for our users, but we just switch a small thing in how we so we maybe refactored an application, and so a lot of things have changed under the hood from development perspective, but not that much for users. We'll still want to A/B test that just to make sure that we haven't oversee something, and so here there's a bit of other constraints that we work with when the product is a bit larger scale, and there's more at stake, basically. And it's also that at the very beginning, every ID you have is a bold new ID that really makes an incremental step, or more than an incremental step to your product. Whereas as the product grows and the company becomes a bit more mature, more the things that you do are small incremental changes, and basically there's on a core product today, it's hard to find an idea or an A/B test that will bring you plus 50% in conversion rates, right? Which was the case 3 years ago when there was much more to discover on the core product. Now, obviously, there's new ideas that are going beyond the core product, on which we're still in that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so to come back to the very pragmatic approach, I think looking back at the post you were mentioning, I think that the pragmatic approach to that would be to always start at the step of the design thinking cycle where you can be the most cost effective and fast to market. If for a feature you know that the development cost will be very high, then for sure it makes sense to spend a lot of time in user research and testing before you start actually developing the product. On the other hand, if for a new idea it's actually quite complicated to do user research, or you just don't have enough people doing user research on the team, but it actually requires 2 days of a software engineer's time and maybe a bit of configuration in a no-code tool to kind of put some things together as a product, then by any means start with that before doing a lot of user research to validate the market and just do a fake door feature on your product that just validate the needs before you invest into research, right? So I think that's the pragmatic approach that still is true.
Yeah, I hear you, and just for me to know how sure how much confidence you put in this approach. If you had to rate your past approach to regard to now, like on a scale of, I don't know, like 10 is I'm sure 100% my approach was totally reliable, and 0 I'm not sure at all.
That's a tough question, because you have to define what reliable means and
what it means to you. What it means to you, at least.
But and I wouldn't describe it as a kind of two different approach between back in the days when I was alone and now we're still only 3. So we hired one UX UI designer and 2 UX UI designers since in the past 2 years. One focusing more on UI and the other more on research. So we're not a 10-person strong team of designers. So everything hasn't changed. It's not black and white between the time I was the only designer on the team and now. Okay. I'd say I'm. If you want me to put a number on it, I'd say it's between 6 and 7. Like it's. And just because it's we change and we continue learning and see that things we did in the past didn't always work as good as things we are doing now, and so just kind of with a bit of humility, we know that what we're doing right now is not it's probably not the best approach, and we're also not we don't have a kind of a very specific mentor or, as I said, a book that we use as inspiration and follow to the letter. And so it would be hard for me to describe exactly an approach. And if you ask me to rate how sure I am that being pragmatic in taking design decisions and approaches, then I'd say 10. I think being pragmatic in how you make both decisions about your design itself, but also how you approach design is something I'll keep doing, and I hope I will always have this ability to identify when I'm getting out of that, and when I'm doing things just because it would be fun to do that, or I saw someone else having personas and that looked very good. And so I start doing that, and so if I do see how working on personas could help us better shape our design, then sure we'll do that. But not just always because we see a good reason to do so.
I agree. So if you have listened to previous podcasts, you might know that we don't love the idea of following a book because it is written in a book. So
Exactly.
I'm really aligned with you on this. I don't know if I would call it always pragmatism, but I agree with you with the approach. Regarding your approach, I understand that at the beginning you had few knowledge, and I love this idea that it's about certainty and uncertainty and knowledge and not knowing where you are going and what is happening. So I might see your story a bit like this. So at the beginning you had no knowledge. You had no knowledge of the territory you were involving in, and then you did something to be able to act within this uncertainty, right? So you put in place a product, and you hoped at the beginning that something happened, right? To get the data and learn from it, and then because you started to build something that's in a way consistently work. You had more knowledge, and now that you have this knowledge, the goal, the game is to maintain what works. So consolidate your current business model and your current product, right? And at the same time improve it. So reinforcing it. But is there a place also for exploring new ways of maybe changing the game? Okay, you are young. This is a young company, but you can say, okay, this is the way we did some stuff right now until now. But we don't know if there's other ways. There are other ways to do it, and you want to explore. And exploring, you need to be in a specific setup. It's more like research, right?
Exactly. That's spot on. It's I think it's too easy to have the temptation to when you start having an established product to just continue iterating on it with small changes and small incremental improvements, and getting out of this requires some effort, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also true that I've been designing on mostly 2 or 3 types of pages for the last 6 to 8 years. Like we have a homepage, a comparison page, and we have review pages about the providers that we compare, and then we have kind of random content pages. And so it's I've been working on the same type of product and pages for years now, and having a fresh look on what we're on the current product, but also on what the opportunities we haven't seized yet is key. And that's there's several points to that. Is having more people into the team and growing the team is this unique opportunity of having fresh pair of eyes looking at what you have done so far, mm-hmm. and to kind of challenge a bit the status quo. That's something I say to everyone joining the company, even if they're not in the product team. You have a unique window of opportunity that lasts 1 to 2 months, where you can see the product, but more generally the company, because it's also interesting to see how we organize ourselves as a company, and what can kind of be identified by newcomers as something that is strange, either in a good or in a bad way. and same goes for the product. Maybe we haven't identified there's something that is just in front of our eyes that we cannot see anymore, but that's someone that comes in with fresh eyes, and so that's one of the way we keep having new ideas and being refreshing. Then another part of it is just being intentional about discovering new things, testing new ideas, and maybe I can share a bit, dig deeper in one example
Yeah.
In a second. And I think the third thing is what we started doing only recently, is doing more generative user research. Like for most of Monito's life, the user research we were doing was to validate an idea or validate an hypothesis, or just validate that a product works as it should work and that user understand how it should work. And since we hired a UX researcher, she's been with us for close to a year now, and we've been able to focus a bit more of energy into just talking to our users and trying to discover new problems that they have that we haven't seen, and really just this idea of generating new ideas from our users, where now most of the ideas were generated internally and then tested with the market for sure, and with the inputs of a lot of users. But the generation of the ideas were mostly coming from within the company rather than from the users. And we've talked to more users, probably to 10 times more users in the past year than we did in the past 6 years.
Yeah,
and it's starting to build up this knowledge of who our users are and what are their needs, and this leads us to explore new territories.
Yeah. Just before you start on the more concrete example you wanted to go, this is probably one of the main criticisms I have against lean startup and this idea of starting from the ideas. That first you need to have an idea, right?
Yeah.
And you cannot know without data that it's a good idea. Like a good idea means that it will meet the demands, the market, right? You have no way to know until you do something, right?
Yeah.
And then you will learn from what you did. So you construct your idea, you put it on the market, and you wait for data. The issue with that is that you hope, and this is real, hope and belief, that what you will learn from the markets will inform you on the future.
Yeah.
So you look at the past, and you assume that the past will inform you properly on the future. And this is one of the blind spots of using analytics and quantitative data to understand a problem or a solution, is that it tells you only what. It doesn't tell you the how and the why. You cannot learn much more from it than, okay, there's something happening. That's it. And then you have to dig, deeper to understand it. And this is where you put your research hat. And the issue with, this is the same issue with big data in general. Big data tells you so much, tells you maybe how at a bigger scale something happens. Maybe you can see that something happens, but you will not know why it happens. So then you need to mix it with stories. You need to meet people, actual people. You need to understand why they did this and how it happened that this led to this change. You cannot know it without these people, right? And this is a bit the criticism behind against this idea that if you have an idea and you put it on the market, you will learn something useful. And I don't say it doesn't work. It's not what I mean, right? But it has limitation, and sometimes we don't understand these limitations until one day you plan something from this data. So you did something from this data, and it just doesn't work, and you don't understand why, because you saw a correlation. Even more causality between this data and what you wanted to do. But there's no causality. It's merely a correlation, right?
But that's why it always needs to be a cycle, because the opposite is often true. Like we've had this. We're working on a full redesign of the platform. We're ramping up a new design system, and in our qualitative user testing, we've received really really positive feedback on the new layout and how it makes a lot of things clearer. And when we A/B testing that the new layout against the legacy one, we consistently see the legacy one performing better than the new layout. So kind of the data is disproving the research to some extent, and so the both are true. Like when the data doesn't match what you expect, the data doesn't tell you the why. But the user research, it's also always important to kind of confront the findings of your user research with actual data from the market. And so, to come back to my previous argument, I think it's really a matter of what is your starting point, and in different settings require different starting points in my view. And in some cases the starting point should be user research, and in some other when you already have an ID, then that's maybe more powerful to just execute on that ID and do user research after that, even though I agree that it puts you in a corner where you have blind spots, but blind spot is another word for focus, maybe. Like,
yeah, you're right. I agree. I agree partially on your first point, and I agree totally on the second point. I agree partially on the first point because then after saying this, we have to take a look at the methods we are using, right? Because if you do a user testing, it's mainly about usability, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you did something, you created a page that existed before and you change it, and you know from the user testing that it's a better usability page. In terms of usability, it's better. But then you do an A/B testing, and the A/B testing is not measuring usability performance, right? It's measuring revenue performance or conversion, in fact.
Yeah.
So it's two metrics, totally unrelated metrics.
I wouldn't say totally unrelated, but different metrics for sure. Yeah.
Because it's not because your page is more usable that it should. There's no way that is a causality between the fact that your page is more usable and the fact that your page is convert better.
I can see ways how a less usable page could convert better, but I'd say that there will often definitely be a causation link between having a page that is easier to understand, easier to use without kind of big UX issues, and that leading to better conversion rates is kind of something that we do see in practice. But what I agree with you is that what we're measuring in user testing, but also in user research, where we really talk with actual users about just the value that the page brings them, rather than whether they can find how to navigate it. It's that currently in our A/B test, we're exactly only looking at conversion rates. How many of the users that arrived on the platform click on a link to be redirected to a provider and made a transfer, which is how we generate revenue. And it's something that Grace, our UX researcher, brought out to the team to try and seek more metrics to measure the success of a change. And so she presented this HERT framework from Google, where the idea is to really look at 5 dimensions rather than just than this one, and look at things that might not directly impact the conversion rates you can measure in one experiment, but will likely impact your retention and your brand and your just your product over time, and the link you have with your users, and how you are able to engage them, how happy they are when they see your product. And so I think that's something we need to get better at, is that to bridge a bit the gap between user research that is very multidimensional in what signals we get from users, and an A/B test or data that can be sometimes a bit too narrow in what they make us look at.
Yeah, it's a question of goals, where you put your goals in the research.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, agree. And so you had this example you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. I think I wanted to mention this this idea we've been playing with, which we call a Monito account, and which is both an example of how we try to test some things that is radically new to what we're doing right now, and also a case where it still made sense for us to use those tricks from the early days of lean UX and building a solution first before doing user research. And so at the moment, most of our users, they come to Monito only once and stay on Monito for only a few minutes before they are redirected to whatever provider was the cheapest at the time they made their comparison. And so usually we never see them back, and because they're opening an account with one of the provider, and most of them will stick with that provider to make all of their transfers moving forward. It's obviously not an ideal situation for us. I mean, we're able to give a lot of value to those users in a very short amount of time, and we're mostly able to capture a lot of that value as well, because we get paid by the providers based on all the transfers that a user will make with them. But still, the main problem with the cancellation is that a user will decide which provider to use based on the one-time comparison at a very specific moment, and we do see prices changes all the time. And over the same week for the same transfer, the cheapest provider might be 3 or 4 different providers depending on which currencies you're sending money to. And so we want to test this idea of having some sort of Monito account that users, that kind of power users could subscribe to. So those are users who would send money regularly, basically. If you just need to send money once per year or once every 2 years, you probably won't be interested in that. But if, as many of our users, you send money several times a month or every month, then it would be interesting for you to maybe have an account where Monito can monitor the market for you, to always tell you which provider is the cheapest, and maybe tell you which providers you should have an account with, or which new provider you don't have yet an account with might be a better option. Or maybe you'd like to have a log of all your transactions with different providers. Maybe you'd like to be able to log in with your Monito account to a new provider to make it easier to switch from providers. So we have a lot of ideas around that, and how this could improve retention. And so rather than starting by doing user research first to really establish whether there will be a need for that and what exactly we could build, because it's very blurry for now. We don't exactly know what this Monito account could be. So what we did was to put a register button on the header of the website, and put together a landing page with our content management system. So this was no development costs required, and then we just hooked that up with a type form. So just a form that was embedded on the website, where users could say a bit more about who they are, what kind of transfer they're making, and then this type form was linked via Zapier, this automation tool, to a webhook on our backend to just create email alerts for exchange rate alerts that we already have since a long time. Like we only have this system where users can subscribe to receive the daily alerts with the exchange rates, alerts every 2 weeks with the cheapest provider for instance. And so we've put that up, and we then just waited, and we waited for quite a few months, because it wasn't so it was attracting a few users, but not that much. But this was then the basis on which we could then do user research. And we then had a database of thousands of users who were interested. We had the answers to a type form that gave us much more information that we had about our users before. So this already gave us kind of an idea of who would be the users who would subscribe to an account. And then we had people we could reach out to user interviews, which is something that is a scarce resource for us, as most of our users are anonymous. Like we have thousands of users per week using the platform, but only a handful of them we're able to contact them, and so that's one example of how we really started again with what some would call those fake door features, where we don't really have a Monito account to offer to those users. We have this proxy of an alert system, but we still put together a landing page and a registration form to get started. Maybe it was 2 weeks after we had this ID, and then it's been now probably 8 months since this is running, and we had various iterations on the type form to just adapt a bit the value proposition and the information we capture. And now since a few months, Grace is doing intense user research on those users, trying to understand their needs, and probably make a few more iterations before we actually start building a product that would cater to the needs of those users. But we already have quite a lot of data insight, and we know that just by putting a small register button, that's how much people we can convert to that. And so if we put that forward in different way, we might be able to get X% of our users sign up to that offer to validate if that's something that makes sense from a business standpoint.
Yeah, this is really interesting, because for me, what you did is research. It's basically research. It's not building something to get data, right? It's you needed this data, and you find a way to retrieve it, and it should be part of the research. It's a smart way to go for research, and I really find it interesting, because it's a concrete examples of how you can get this data that you wouldn't get if you didn't do this. So I find it really interesting. Although I see maybe one slight issue in terms of research, but it's not a real big one, because in fact you don't change so much the original value proposition. Is that you still have you have an issue with the sample, because the sample data you have is from your existing user base. So from the existing value proposition, how your current product is marketed, outside. So you don't know if your new improved value proposition could attract new type of users you don't have currently, and their needs might be a bit different from your existing user base. So that's maybe one slide. But in your case, it's not a big one. And you did it well. I find it really smart to say, okay, we use our current product to derive one part of the stream of people using the product to retrieve the data. And as I said, it's totally should be part of the way we approach research, especially in your case where you don't have so much a way to get to the users, right?
Exactly, and I think I would agree. We can agree on the fact that it's research, because that was mostly the intent, right? It was to validate an idea and get more data. But maybe what I meant by not starting with it did not start with just speaking to people, whether it's our users or just random people, and try to understand their problem and then come up with an idea to solve that problem and then test it. It's just we already have users and we already have some ideas, and so we identify a problem that our users don't see, is that they are using a provider that is cheap at the time they compare, but that might not be the cheapest for all of their transfer over 1 year. So that's a problem we know is happening, but that most of our users don't, and that's the core issue. And so then we're coming up with solutions to solve that issue, and then we're not building them. I agree. We're kind of faking them and see how users respond to that. And so I think it's definitely It's definitely research, but in a quite specific perspective. And regarding the bias that you mentioned about the sample bias, it's I think it's true on more than one dimension. There's, for example, we identified that a lot of users registering to Monito were people who actually really didn't understand the value proposition at all, but who were kind of desperate because they need to send money. They need to make a transfer that is impossible to make. Like there are some countries where it's impossible to send money to, and then there are citizens of some countries who might have issues signing up with almost all providers because of compliance reasons and stuff like that. And so those users have tried to open an account with half a dozen providers before finding Monito, and they arrive on Monito and just blindly click and register and then enter the details, and they're suddenly excited because they can enter the currencies, and then they're just disappointed. It just wasn't what they wanted for, because we're not a money transfer provider and they were expecting us to be. And so here there's kind of and they are quite highly represented in the percentage of users who sign up to the account. And obviously it's interesting to know that those users exist, but so far as the rest of the industry, we don't know how to solve that problem. And so that might be an idea that we might generate at some point, but for now it's not what we want to focus on. But then regarding the fact that we're only testing with users, we show that we're already able to attract to the platform. I think that's something that's one of the constraints that I like. I think when you do research, you need to have a fixed variables or fixed constraints to get you in a direction, right? You cannot say, I'm a designer, I'm doing research, and I'm going into things totally open-minded I'm happy to be surprised by whatever I will discover. I mean, this is something you can do the week before startup weekend, where you just, go randomly at some place and try to identify an issue. But when you already have a product and already have a user base, then using that as a starting point to say, okay, we already have this audience. How can we serve them better? And so we're starting with, we have this audience, we have this knowledge of the data. What can we do in between to bring more value to the users? And I think from a company strategy standpoint, our vision is more to stick with our user base, which is very diverse in terms of what type of users they are and where they come from. We've had users make transfer in more than 3,000 combination of currencies and sending money for very different reasons. But basically, we want to probably expand our services to cater to those needs beyond money transfer, but with the same kind of user base, which are people who move between have their life spread across countries, basically. Yeah. And so using that as a constraint, I think is something that rather give a right impulse and a right vision rather than really introducing a big bias.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I have two questions for you, because you mentioned something that I find it's I don't know if it's necessarily true, but you mentioned okay, I will ask my question and you will see the points. Do you think research has to be necessarily motivated to find something?
I think if you search something, it's because you want to find something, and so it doesn't mean that you need to come in at every user interview with, I have this question I want an answer to, but it certainly means that you need to start every user interview knowing why you're doing that, and so it's something we started doing more and more is having just interview with users that we recruit from the platform. And so we've started building our own panel of users, which is something that we've ramped up over the past few months. And so here there will be interviews where we just want to know who our users are, how they use and yeah, what are their money related or migration related concerns or habits or issues, and so we're really just prospecting about getting and here the goal is just getting a better understanding of who our users are. But I personally find it more effective to always also have some hypothesis that we want to confront to the reality of our users. And in some cases, it can be just a written hypothesis. It can be a wireframe. It can be a high fidelity markup or our live website. But I think having hypothesis when you go is always important. But yeah, I think I know I have this bias toward IDs, and I have IDs and I want to test them, and I think it's great that I'm not the only designer in the team anymore, so that we can have a bit more of let's just listen and I mean, I don't expect our users to come up with the IDs we need to implement, but having IDs and implementing them is our job. But basing those IDs on problems that our users have and that we can identify is key for the long-term success of the product.
Yeah, well, we can say that. But I wasn't necessarily speaking of user interviews, because I agree. You have to come with something. If you want to discuss with the users, you have to have a reason, some way to discuss with them. I agree. But you could imagine that you have a constant flux of input from the users by any means, like let's say a qualitative survey that runs constantly on your website, for instance, and you have this
it arrives directly in the Slack channel.
Yeah, so you have this feedback from the users, and you can do analysis from this feedback to research for themes or research for trends, or you can find things without the first motivation of I have this idea and I want to know if it's right or wrong, or something in between. You can say, okay, I don't know yet if I will find something specific, but I know that there's data, and then I can research from it, find maybe a trend or maybe a topic or just a rough idea of a fear that is, reminiscent in the population we have, and that we thought that product will solve, and in fact it appears to be the case. I don't know, something maybe vague, but that helps you generate more ideas internally, as you already do, and say, okay, now we confront with more clear hypothesis, and just I think this way to you need as you say a feedback loop. You need something to inseminate with ideas, and maybe with an understanding of what is the problem. Because if you go always with the motivation of answering your questions, you might don't know if your questions is the right question, right? You don't know if it's the right question.
You're 100% correct. Absolutely, and it's something that it isn't easy when you start, because you don't have enough data and enough users for that to be a robust way to generate trends or identify trends and then work on them. That's definitely something that we see now that has a tremendous value. So the way we do that right now is we're using Hotjar, and we have this small kind of incoming feedback widget on the side of the most pages on our website, and we get this stream of constant feedback, and then on more ad hoc basis we'll run qualitative survey with open-ended questions on specific type of pages on the website. And that's we then spend quite a lot of time in spreadsheets to make sense of that data and identify trends, and that it has brought a lot of value to us in the past. And for example, one of the recent trends that we're observing is more users complaining about the fact we display promotional pricing on our website. And so it's an interesting topic, because so we're able to negotiate better deals for our users with our providers who want to be ranked competitively on the platform. And so in most cases, our users will get better deal than if they go directly to the provider's website, which is great. They can save even more money. But the kicker here is that the promotional pricing usually applies only on the first transfer, or the first 3, or in some cases the first 10 transfer. But it's mostly a temporary thing. And then a user who benefited from one of those promotional pricing currently has no good way to know if he should continue using that provider, or if he should switch to a new provider. And so we've probably launched a few more providers that had promotional pricings in the past months, and we've seen that this theme rise in the feedback that we received, that people say that they that the comparison doesn't make sense for us when they come back, because the promotional pricing that we're comparing their provider with isn't the rates that they will have if they use that provider. And so so this wasn't something that we had kind of top of mind, and we now do because of that feedback. So it's one of the latest example I can think of in how listening to having ways to get this constant feedback from your users is key.
Yeah. And I have maybe another question for you, because you mentioned the fact that people were unaware of the fact that the prices change constantly, right?
Yeah.
And I've been working in the financial sector for some time now, and I know that information, awareness of the public about those kind of things is really hard to share with them. It's really hard to get them understand this fact. And do you think you have an obligation in some way to inform better your public, and is maybe an idea for the evolution of your products maybe in the future to be also information platform as much as it is a product for people to transfer money, right?
And we are already on that path. We have thousands of content pages about reviews of providers, guides about specific countries, specific ways to send money, how to understand how much you pay. And in terms of the core product, it's always a struggle between the necessity to have something that is simple enough for people to understand and act on, and something that is sophisticated enough to provide all the necessary information to make informed decisions. Because the first things we need to fight against is people not knowing they actually have an issue in the first place. Most people don't know that when they send money with the bank account from Switzerland to France, they're losing, the transfer might seem free because there's no fee applied by most banks, but you're losing money on the exchange rates, and other providers might provide you with a much better exchange rate. And the same things goes with cash transfers, where most users will only, or not most, a lot of users are savvy enough, and as they send money enough, they will check the exchange rates to know how it compares with the last time they sent. But still, you cannot expect them to kind of make the math and see how much money they're losing on a specific transfer against the mid-market exchange rates. And so we first need to highlight that, and then the trend that we've seen is that we've made our comparison simpler and simpler over the iterations, like removing information, removing stuff to make it more efficient at connecting users to the best provider. And I think we do a good job at that. Sometimes maybe at the price of having every users make the optimal decision. Like I think there's most of the value is from switching between a bad provider or bank to one of the online providers that provide a good exchange rate. And so if we're able to be very good at that, then that's what we're optimizing for. But maybe in some cases we're not helping the users make the exact best decision between two very good online providers, because we've hidden we currently don't offer a way to make it easy to compare if you want to send money with your credit card rather than your bank transfer or debit card. And so you have to click on every result to see what is the added cost of using your credit card.
Beautiful. So we are back. We were cut by the recording system we are using. This is not the first time it happened.
Too much.
Yeah, maybe this is the sign, as you said. You told me right after it stopped that it is a sign that we have to end.
Exactly.
So you were saying you were explaining.
How maybe the difficulty to find the right balance between presenting something in a very simple way so that every user can directly act on it, and in a sufficiently sophisticated way so that users can make the optimal decision every time, and taking all of the aspects that might come in a comparison into account. And your question started with, can we do a better job at explaining to the users that prices change often? And I think we need to, because that's a current issue we have now. And there's several ways I could think as we could do that. We could maybe directly make a comparison about the average cost of a provider over the past month, rather than making a spot comparison about what is the cheapest right now. I still believe that maybe there is potential with this Monito account to provide a more advanced comparison for power users and keep the core product very simple for first-time users. That might be the way to strike the right balance.
Yeah, maybe a Monito Pro in the future, right?
Exactly.
So thanks very much for your time. I think as we said during the off moment right after the unfortunate stop of the recording, that we were ending on this point, and I know that you are looking for new position, right? You open new position at your company, so here's the time for you to do
my shameless plug. Exactly. Absolutely. We know at a point where so we were operating as a single product team until now, and this single product team has no more than 10 engineers. There's 2 designers and me as a product manager, and it's becoming too big to be a single team. And so we're starting to think about how to organize that team into autonomous teams, focusing on different dimensions of the product. And we hired quite a few software engineers over the past 6 months, and we're now ready to get more product people on board. And so we're looking for both a senior product manager, but more relevant to our discussion is the fact we're looking for a senior UX UI designer to ideally someone that has the ability to work on a relatively wide spectrum, from user research up to designing mockups within an existing design system. In my very biased opinion, I think it's a super exciting position in a company that is really product and mission focused, where design is at the central place of the company, and whether or not it might succeed. And so if anyone listening to the podcast and who like some of the ways I've described it, we walk, then I would happy to start a discussion and see if there's an opportunity to work together.
And yeah, this is very interesting. I recommend you to everyone listening to this episode to take at least a look at first at the website, because it's a really good website, and secondly to look at the position if you are interested, because this is really interesting. Even the way you approach open positions and how you want to get the participant to know better your company is you have an open book, right, about the rules inside the company and how you describe yourself, right?
Hopefully not too much rules, but yeah, we have a company handbook that is public. And so that's the same we use internally to onboard people. And yeah, I have this approach where I really believe in when hiring is a two-way street, and it's usually easier for me to describe how it is to work at a company than for a candidate to describe how it is to work with me, with oneself, basically, as a candidate. And so I like to give candidates as much information as I can on the job, the position, but also the company, how we work, and that's where the handbook is useful, so that they can make a decision for themselves whether joining Monito is the right move for them, whether we are a good fit. And I usually trust that decision from candidates. Say, yeah, that sounds like a place I would thrive and a place that I would do the best work that I've done so far. And so that's really how we approach that. And yeah, hopefully the company handbook is more about describing the core principles that guide how we work, the value they derive from, and some example of how concrete things happen, and hopefully not too much rules. I had a discussion last week with a candidate it was coming from the corporate world, and I don't remember exactly how we come up to this discussion about headphone policies, where I think he asked if we had one, kind of joking when we were discussing that we were kind of a no bullshit company, and I say yes, we actually do. And he was startled for a minute, and until I was able to describe that our headphone policy is that everyone in the company gets a good noise cancelling headphones when they start, and his headphones policy at his previous job was that you weren't allowed to have ones when you were working, and so you were allowed to listen to music when working. And so the policies and rules that we have are hopefully they don't sound like rules, they're just ways that we work.
Yeah, it was a misuse on my side of the term rules.
Exactly.
I was thinking of, to be honest, of the word I wanted to say, and rules came out of my mouth, but it was
no problem.
Yeah. I have just maybe a last question because it came in my mind like this. If we link back to the beginning of this adventure, this journey on your side, you came from a non-profit association, right? To help people in Africa, right?
Exactly, in Cameroon.
In Cameroon, and do you still, in some way, try to help those this kind of organizations through your company? I know that you are really open to this idea of doing good with your company, and I think this is a really great topic. We don't have the time to discuss it right now, but just maybe a few words like this. I'm really interested in knowing.
Of course. So first of all, the non-profit that supports projects in Cameroon still exists. We still have microcredit and scholarship projects in Cameroon. And then when it comes to Monito and the social impact of the company, that's something that really is my key drivers to work at Monito, and I think it's the case for everyone working at Monito, that having this mission and having a positive impact embedded at the heart of the company is essential. And it's less about, okay, we're a company and we have this revenue generating business on that side, and then how can we make how can we support a good cause on the other side? It's finding a product and a business model to support that product where the impact is at the center. And we estimate that for every franc of revenue, every dollar of revenue we generate, our users saved on average $8 over the next months or years. And so there's really it's never a perfect alignment. There's always tensions at the margin, but at the heart there's a very good alignment with how we make the business thrive and how we have a social impact with those tens of thousands of users who are able to send a bit more every month to the friends and families that they support abroad, and that's 10% of the world population that rely in one way or the other from those remittances, those money transfers, and so that's a very distributed impact. We haven't changed the life of anyone, but we've had a small impact on the lives of tens of thousands, and that's really what gets us going.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, for this interesting discussion, and I really hope that you will continue to strive as a company, because you increase quite the size of the company really quick each year, right? It's
exactly when you interviewed with us, we were at an 8 people company or a 7 people company. We're now 22, and so that's. We're growing. It's exciting.
Well, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me. Always nice chatting with you.
Yeah, and maybe see you again, maybe on another episode in the future.
Exactly.
Thanks. Bye.
See you. Bye, Kevin.